Jay Karen is joining us. He's the CEO of the National Golf Course Owners Association, and I've been trying to get Jay on the show for some time to match up our schedules, because I think it's important to hear from someone of Jay's stature so that we get that balancing conversation in terms of where the game's going. So, with that, I say good morning, Jay. Nice to see you. How are things in your world?
Hey, Matt, it's great to see you. I love that intro, that the golf industry, the center of the universe seems to be what's happening on television and all of that. I affectionately call that golf Hollywood, by the way. And, because this is a $102 billion industry. And the enormous lion's share of that centers around the golf course and the 15,000 golf courses in the United States. And we're lucky to have a game where the fans are also the economic engine of this entire game. It's not like NASCAR, if you will. It's very, very different. It's 15,000 courses that are doing so well right now for the past 5 years. But we need golf Hollywood too, because it's a source of fuel of excitement and enthusiasm for the game in so many ways. So it's very symbiotic. But I appreciate how you teed that up, because the golf course and the golfers are really the whole universe of golf. Yeah.
Yeah, and what Jay was just telling you folks is that 100 billion with a B plus is direct economic impact of the golf industry on the U.S. economy. The indirect is more than double that, and that comes in travel and all these other different areas. So, Jay, let's talk about that for a second. As if you were addressing a member of Congress that you have done many times. We actually have video of you addressing Congress in the highest corridors of power in the United States to make people understand how important the game of golf is in every way, but in particular as that economic engine in the United States. Could you fill us in on some of the details of who golf is today so people can know?
Sure. And we've been going to Capitol Hill for about 15 years now, telling golf story. And Matt, you've been there too. You've interviewed us on site there at National Golf Day. And, the beautiful thing is that we've gone from storytelling now to engagement with our elected officials. They know who we are, and we have fans and supporters in Congress for the game and the business of golf. So to see that tide change over time has been very gratifying. But we do go to the Hill to talk about the goodness of golf, that we employ 2 million people, the $102 billion, economy that you talked about, that we have good stewards of land and water and air. And that's a perception story that we have to change in Congress, because if you don't know golf, you may think negatively about the use of land and water and all of that. And so and the truth underneath that should be what the perception really is. And so we always have our work cut out for us in Capitol Hill, especially as people get reelected, to tell the story of golf and what we contribute to the golf economy. Because there are threats and alligators and dragons that we have to slay that coming down from Capitol Hill, whether it's on taxation issues, EPA regulations. We've been on this thing called the SIN list in the tax code for 50 years, so that if disaster relief is available to businesses after a flood or a storm or, whatever it might be, golf is excluded from that based on language in the tax code. So we're still trying to change that in Washington. So the good news is, Matt, you've been with us, over the haul on this and changing. And golf is really seen in a very positive light. The last 5 years have had a lot to do with that. With COVID, and that golf was one of the few things that Americans could go outside and do and recreate and enjoy company. And we've been kind of benefiting from that ever since. And so golf is in a very healthy place, and we've got a great story to tell.
Yeah, and there are, to your point, Jay, there are misconceptions about the game of golf that I'd love to touch on for a second. I mean, I love baseball. I took my wife and 2 sons to a game, and with tickets and with parking and with food, et cetera, et cetera. It was a $500 day just to take the family out. Where does golf place in terms of recreational activities that you can engage in, and how does it compare, given the misconceptions that some people have of golf?
Sure. The average green fee in America is still like around 40 something dollars for a public golf course. And so you think of, 4.5 hours of time, or maybe 5 hours on the Saturday morning, depending upon where you're playing and how busy it is. what a way to spend time as a family in the afternoon, the twilight hours, to get out there and play 9 holes with your family, and to be able to bond in ways that sometimes are hard to do in movie theaters and even baseball games. You're paying attention to something. You might talk to each other a little bit, but you're paying attention to the game. Golf, you really are together. And the value of that time with friends and family is irreplaceable. I often say, Matt, that there's nothing in society like golf that connects people. You become strangers on the first tee, become fast friends by the 18th hole. And that's pretty special. So economically, yes, golf courses have really had to raise rates over the past 5 years. We were in a 15-year, I call industry recession, from really 2005 to 2020, where there was stagnation. Green fees were flat that entire time, essentially. So when everything else in America was going up in price, golf stayed flat, which means actually over that time, relatively speaking, it was cheaper than ever. And public golf courses especially, could not save capital to put into their irrigation systems, back into their clubhouses, to do any real investments in themselves was nearly impossible. So now finally we've got a good story, and golf course owners and operators are leaning forward into their businesses, taking the extra capital, putting it back in, improving the facilities, changing it, modernizing them. So many courses are putting in top tracer range facilities, which are fun as heck, to go out there and beat balls in this really cool environment with the shot tracing technology and food and beverage experiences. So they're modernizing the experience for consumers and not resting on their laurels, for sure.
Jay, when you talk about these some 15,000 golf courses in the United States, people love to cheer for the little guy. In every community we go to, you hear people say, support the local business. This is small business America. This is literally the foundation of the US economy. How do you define it when you're talking about those 15,000 plus golf courses? Where do they fall on that spectrum of small town American company versus the big companies that have multiple locations and courses under their wing?
I mean, we're one of the most fragmented industries imaginable. 15,000 courses, and probably 14,000 owner operators, and the largest in our space is smaller than the smallest businesses in some of those industries that you're talking about, right? The average golf course does probably between $1 and $2 million a year in revenue. Average public golf course, but to what you're saying, Matt, about the kind of the local support, the local courses, what you're seeing, there's some interesting changes in supply over the past several years. The municipal sector is the only sector of supply that has grown over the last several years, according to the National Golf Foundation, our friends over there, by something like 6% over the last several years. And it's because either they've built a couple courses or they're acquiring other kinds of courses to add to the Parks and Recreation portfolio, right? So really local government is leaning in and saving golf courses from being developed and delivering a quality product to their local citizens. So there's a real renaissance happening in the municipal side. We're talking about small businesses. There are 3,000 small businesses in golf run by local government. They see the goodness in it, right?
Interesting.
And so when you look at the mom and pop courses and the public golf courses that were built during the construction boom, we're now 30, 40 years out from that construction boom, and these were built in suburbia, close to population centers. And as my friend Joe Bedditz, the NGF, used to say, the dirt is worth more than the grass. And so when you look at the future trend supply of supply in America, what concerns me is the survivability of the privately owned public golf course down in the next generation, because they're ripe for development when it might be worth $3 million as a golf course, but it might be worth $30 million to a developer, and they'll be willing to pay for that. And so I'm concerned about kind of the future of daily fee affordable golf and the supply in America when we look at the next 50 years.
Why wouldn't we look at that, Jay, the same way as we would look at, say, a public park or playground, and say clearly that land is going to be worth a lot of money to a developer because of where it's located in the center of a town or just on the outskirts of a town? Why is it that golf is a higher target than an area such as that?
Well, you've got 200 contiguous acres of land. I mean, think about it. Where, if you were trying to build a corporate campus of some kind, or a hospital, or a new housing development, you want to be near a population center. Where are you going to find large tracts of land? Golf courses are that oftentimes, and they may have the favorable zoning for redevelopment. And if that's the case, then it becomes pretty darn valuable. You got to look at all the courses that have been built the last couple of years, the private courses that have been built. The great courses are being built around America the past several years, but they're in the middle of nowhere, or at least they're way out in the country, right? Because that's the only place you can find 300 acres of land to build that playground, right? So, yeah, but interesting that you brought up baseball a few minutes ago, Matt, because when we talk about the perceptions of the game and the industry, when you're in an airplane and you're kind of flying, you're you're at 1,000 or 2,000 feet, and you're starting to come into a city to land, and you look outside and you see interesting stuff. If the average American saw baseball diamonds below them, 1,000, 2,000 feet below, they say, "Oh, look at that! That's Americana. That's healthy. Look at those ball fields." And then so many Americans will see a golf course, and if you're a golfer, you're like, "Right on! Look at that golf course! Isn't that awesome?" If you're not a golfer, you may say, is that the best use of land and water and so forth? So the of golf is very mixed. Until golf courses are seen from the air like that as wholesome, just like ball fields, we've got work to do in industry, because we know history. It's kind of one of those, if you know, we know
Yeah.
the goodness, the total goodness of that piece of property.
Yeah, well, let's go down that road for a second and give you an opportunity to speak to those virtues, because I think that's an important point for people to understand. From a land use standpoint, the impact of a golf course is actually better than some remarkable other areas. And sometimes people have gotten upset with me over the years when I talk about runoff, et cetera, that you're going to get more from it through an agricultural use. And I don't have any problem with the farms whatsoever. What I'm trying to do is show you on a scale of what a golf course means to the environment is far better as one who is looking after and making sure the environment is long-term healthy than many people think. Can you speak to that virtue?
Yeah, this is a tough one, because this is where values come into conflict, right? And everybody's got pretty virtuous values that they're trying to bring to the table when they look at land use. Um, let's look at California. A couple of years ago, an assembly person in California tried introducing a bill that would offer financial incentive to municipalities that had golf courses to convert their golf courses into affordable housing. Right? I mean, you gotta admit there's an affordable housing crisis in America in many places. So people want to solve for that. You got to sympathize with that. But when you look at golf, and it's just redevelop that land. Well, in this case, in Los Angeles County, the only public golf courses to speak of courses. So if you turned the golf courses into affordable housing, which is its own ball of wax, then public golf disappears in Los Angeles County completely. And then you're talking about what's the environmental impact of whatever's being built to replace that, right? There's the human impact, environmental impact. Let's talk about that argument today, Matt. It's a very complicated one, but at the end of the day, it's those that take a closer look at golf and its use and its community impact, its neutral or sometimes even positive impact on the environment between habitat preservation and like filtration, the natural of turf grass and the oxygen, the oxygen that it creates and so forth. There's so much good about it, but we've got storytelling to do to try to change that perception.
Yeah, and in fairness, when you start to look at the impact, and now I'm talking about the social impact, the socioeconomic impact that golf can play with programs such as the First Tee and many, many others that are introducing young people to the virtues of the game, to the virtues of getting out and getting exercise and getting sunshine and socializing with other people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They go on and on and on. There is grounds that we can have this discussion that goes beyond the virtues of what a golf course means as an open space use for people. And it brings me kind of back to, you talked about the year 2020 as that bookend on this side of saying, our stagnation economically from the standpoint of what should be charged for the service that is provided. Really, 2020 was that demarcation. Obviously, we know it was because of COVID. And what I'm curious is when everything spiked during COVID, post-COVID, and all these virtues people started to discover in the game of golf, and all of a sudden, you look on it even on social media now, golf is cool again. right? And a lot of young people are engaged in it and playing it and trying it in whatever form and fashion. That anything, to me, anytime and any place that you hold a club in hand, you're playing the game of golf. And I love that the game has all these different facets and that it's aspirational, that regardless of where you start, people want to go out to the green grass golf course too. All of that is fun. All of that is great. You talked about it with the new and exciting simulators and hitting bays and all these different areas that they have. But my question is when it was surging through COVID, and you're watching all this, Jay, did you think it was going to last? Were you convinced that where we're at with golf now, that threshold that we crossed through, that people discovered, were you convinced that it was going to ramp up and stay up? And how has that impacted the industry for you?
Great question. Um, so, and I was in the trenches with the other association leaders trying to keep golf open when everything was indiscriminately shut down in America, right? And so I felt this viscerally as we had to argue for golf's goodness at those times, 5 years ago now. I got to tell you this, though. I'm always cautiously optimistic about things, right? I'm right brain, left brain. I see the good, I see the bad, and as I analyze things as an executive, and it's a great question because I felt pretty bullish about our chances that this was going to stick around, and here's why. The last time we saw this kind of spike in interest in the game was the Tiger effect of the mid to late 90s, right? All of a sudden, millions of people are finding their way to the game because this really cool guy, and he's made it athletic, and he's making this more expansive and diverse. This is awesome for the game of golf. Let's go play. And the problem is that doesn't translate to playing very well. Like when I was a kid, I loved Pete Rose and Ricky Henderson. So I thought, let me get out there and try playing baseball as a kid. Well, my ability to play baseball in the diamond had nothing to do with my love for these baseball stars, right? So a lot of people left the game. But what COVID did is it brought people to the game for the very reasons, the same reasons they play the game for the rest of their lives. And that's why I thought there's something in the DNA of this change that's different. If these millions of people are coming to the game because they want to get outside, they want to be with their friends, they want to try their hand at this challenging, game that they hear is so awesome, and have fun and recreate and all of these things. If that's why they're going, the chances of them sticking around once they discover that's actually what it is so much greater. So I was thinking the organic attrition would be so small, because we always have people leaving the game for reasons, but the attrition would be so much smaller than it was back in the late 90s, because the reasons are different. So Matt, yeah, I had a feeling, and I was optimistic that this was going to have some lasting effect.
Awesome stuff. I absolutely love it. I do want to ask you too about. I don't know how many people are actually engaged in considering this, but changing our clocks in spring and fall, and maybe it's because of my bias as a golf guy, drives me insane. Um, where do you guys stand on that? And do you have a position, and are you working in any way to try to address that?
Yeah. So we got called early this spring from Senator Ted Cruz's office. He showed that footage earlier, to testify at the Commerce and Transportation and Science Committee meeting, where he was holding a hearing about this, because there are serious opinions on either side whether we should make it permanent daylight saving time, permanent standard time, or status quo. But there's definitely an opinion to lock the clock, as there's a movement called just lock the clock, choose a side, so we can stop doing this ridiculous ritual of changing the clocks twice a year. So we surveyed the golf industry to understand sentiment. We looked at economic impact of what either would be permanent daylight saving time or permanent standard time. And we had some pretty compelling data. Now, I got to tell you, the industry is not in full consensus about this, but the sentiment is pretty strong to make daylight saving time permanent. If Congress was to say, we're going to pick a side here, then the side that the golf industry by and large is in favor of is permanent daylight saving time. And that would basically mean from November to March, when we fall back, that we would no longer fall back, and that the sun would be aligned more with recreational hours than than sleeping hours, right? And so basically keeping those afternoon sun hours and giving people a chance to get outside and recreate, And there's an economic case here too, Matt. We had to talk about. There's the health case for sure. People getting outside, recreating. You can make all of the health cases for that. You know, the exercise and social aspect of this is so good for people to fight depression, obesity, and all of these things. But the economic case was very compelling too. That if we went to permanent standard time and basically the sun set earlier between March and November, we would lose at least $2 billion in the golf economy because those precious afternoon rounds, which actually demand higher rates on the tee sheet over the course of the week, we would see this economic burden that we would have to bear, and that was not something that we were going to advocate for. But there are a lot of golf courses, Matt, that like the downtime in the winter. So when we change the clocks and all that, they like giving their teams a little bit more downtime in the winter. They're seasonal businesses, and so they're okay with that. So it's why it's not 100% consensus, but about 2/3 of golf courses report that they would like daylight saving time made permanent. About 25% or so said kind of status quo, leave it as it is, and about 6 or 7% said permanent standard time. And those that like permanent standard time, they probably have an inordinate number of seniors playing very early in the morning, maybe so they can get to their 11 o'clock, canasta game. I don't know, but they don't want to disrupt that schedule. In the Sun Belt in the winter, teeing off at 6 or 7 a.m. is a good thing. If the clock changed and so that's the sun rose a little bit later on the clock that day, it would shift things for them. But by and large, that's kind of where we came out at. And I was fortunate to kind of represent golf and tell our story alongside the medical industry and the traffic and transportation industry there on Capitol Hill. It was a privilege. We don't know where they're going to land. I have a feeling that they're not going to land on one or the other. But if they do, I think I sense a favoritism toward daylight saving time.
Well, my fingers are crossed that happens. I know from I go back to my days on the golf course side, and as we got the weather started to shift over the years. I can remember back in the day, Jay, we had a guy come in and say, I want to book October 31st. And I was in Newport, Rhode Island, the last course that I managed. I was in Newport, Rhode Island. He wanted to book October 31st for like the next decade for this collegiate, future collegiate events. And, we're sitting back with one hand over the other going, yeah, no problem at all. And I remember the first couple times they held their event, there were snow flurries in the air. By the time we got about a decade out, only a decade out, it was 72 degrees, 65 to 72, absolutely gorgeous. And as we went into October and November, sometimes the weather was so perfect, we wished we had that little bit more sunlight, a little bit longer days if possible, just so that we could keep the golf rolling and keep a little more revenue coming in, to tell you the truth, and because it was a time for us shortly thereafter that we were going to be tucked in under a bed of warm snow, and that's just the way it goes. Jay, you have been awesome today. I'm sure you're sensing it. I'm sure your diary is backing up, because I kept you a lot longer than what we expected, or you probably expected, because this conversation is fascinating to me, and I think it's so important. And I think it's so important that people know what's going on in terms of how it impacts them, and who the National Golf Course Owners Association is, and the critical role that you play. Can I end it with this question then, if you would allow? What are you, as the CEO, what are you most excited about right now?
When I look at the game of golf, what I'm most excited about is the cultural changes that are happening, the vibe that is changing, right? That the golfers themselves, through social media and other channels and vehicles, are basically changing the culture from aspirational and elite to aspirational and accessible. That's a huge difference, right?
Yes.
And I like what's happening there. And it kind of shows you that who's in control of the golf culture, who's the most impactful on the golf culture. It's the golfers themselves now. Social media has changed that. So I'm excited that we have this fuel and this energy and this interest in the game, that millions of people are out there hitting balls in simulators and Top Tracer range, and we have what every sport would dream of. These golf adjacent and golf, exciting pieces of technology happening, and these experiences. The question is, for me, and this is the challenge, so I'm excited, but I'm also like, what work has to be done here, is what's the connective tissue between all of these things and the green grass golf course? Are golf course owners and operators going to embrace the culture of fun and change and whatever is happening out there? Are they going to embrace it, or are they going to keep it at bay? Are they going to bring in that technology that people are enjoying off course? Are they going to bring it to the course, the gamified ranges, the simulators, all of that? That's the question for my members, and we are encouraging them to be bullish about this as well, to kind of bet on this kind of new vibe, new experience. So that excites me a lot.
Yeah, open hearts, open minds, consuming the game in the way that people want to. I love everything that you said. I'm happy to have had you on today, Jay. I really appreciate, as I mentioned, the massive amount of time that you've given us. Love what you guys are doing in the industry because it's a really, really important message and role that you're playing. And I love that we had this opportunity to kind of share it.
Anytime you want to talk shop about this industry, Matt, I'd love to do it.
You know, I love talking shop. Jay, thanks so much. We'll talk to you.
Take care.